Mr. Chairman, to start, we have Dane Wigington online.
Thank you to everyone on the panel and for the hearing of this issue. To start with, I want to obliterate the condensation trail narrative. We at Geoengineeringwatch.org, and we are the largest organization in the world on this subject. We're the only organization that has taken a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab to altitude, top scientists in it, all on film, all on the record, to sample what heavy aircraft were emitting from nozzles, not a byproduct of jet exhaust, but from nozzles. We processed that at one of the world's most recognized testing institutions, and we found exactly what we knew we would find: climate engineering elements starting with aluminum nanoparticles. Aluminum nanoparticles, bioavailable aluminum, is toxic to all life, period, no exceptions. It is sterilizing soil microbiome. It is affecting root systems. And again, this is testing done with agencies like the USDA and biologists in California. And in our film, The Dimming, we have U.S. Air Force generals, two of them acknowledging these operations, former Canadian Minister of Defense acknowledging these operations. Most important of all, we have up-close film footage of these aircraft at altitude, KC-10s, KC-135, C-17 Globemasters, nozzles visible turning dispersions on and off. We have up-close photographs of retrofit commercial aircraft, and I'm not implicating commercial pilots or personnel. These systems are automated, but we have up-close photographs, retrofit nozzles mounted on wing pylons aimed at the exhaust jet stream to make this look like, quote, condensation. When we see a researcher in Antarctica with temperatures 40 or 50 below, with their breath condensing, do clouds start to form above their head? That is a blatant, glaring lie. Again, film footage proves this is a sprayed dispersion, not, quote, condensation. We did about 500 lab tests with the University of Minnesota, an internationally recognized agricultural institution. And with those 500 lab tests over that state, we extrapolated how much material was in that precipitation and projected that globally to determine approximately how much is being dispersed and disguised around the globe on an annual basis. It's something in the range of 40 to 60 million tons. And here's my point. There's a very vast difference between localized, publicized cloud seeding operations and climate engineering. It's comparing an ant to an elephant, and many have gone to great length to try to blur this clear distinction. And the cloud seeding operations, even at smaller scale, are still a very big negative. Anytime you affect the natural cycles, if you do cause something to precipitate in one location, it didn't get where it was going. That's very clear. So when you have people upstream from Wyoming cloud seeding, like Idaho or Washington, and if they were able to cause precipitation, it wouldn't get to Wyoming, obviously. But the overlying massive, exponentially more massive climate engineering Manhattan project, which is geoengineering, is negating any other effect from any other source. And this is well recognized. We have the entire global climate science community stating their urgent desire to put aircraft in the air, spray payload dispersions. These are patented processes, by the way. All that is available. Patents are atmospheric testing, testimony from scientists, U.S. Air Force military personnel, former government scientists. By the way, there's a federal gag order right now on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees. Why would you gag the weathermen if you didn't have something very big to hide? But all this data is in the geoengineeringwatch.org documentary, The Dimming. We are non-political. We don't sell anything. Our mission is to expose this issue. My background is with Bechtel Power Corporation, largest engineering firm in the world. My home was on the cover of the world's largest renewable energy magazine. I have solar, wind, and hydro, and that's what brought me into this issue. When I finished this project in Northern California, in the wilderness of Northern California, I was losing 60, 70, 80% of my solar PV uptake, my solar panel uptake on some days because of what these aircraft were emitting, and I knew that couldn't be condensation. I began to test my precipitation to see if I found climate engineering elements in it. I hoped I would not. I knew it would change the course of my life if I did. I found it there, aluminum nanoparticles specifically. From an initial rain test of 7 parts per billion over 18 months, I had a single rain event with 3,450 parts per billion of aluminum nanoparticles, and aluminum is named specifically in climate engineering patents for solar radiation management. This is literally toxic rain. There's a great effort, and why so many from academia are so invested in denying what irrefutable data proves, film footage proves, military officials acknowledge why so many academicians are invested in denying this issue is mind-numbing. The entire global climate science community, again, is urgently calling for solar radiation management to be deployed. It has been for 80 years already. We have U.S. Senate documents at geoengineeringwatch.org, 800 pages long, outlining the scope and scale of these programs going back as far as 1978. In that document, it calls for intergovernmental cooperation, even between, quote, otherwise adversarial nations, and for blanket legal immunity for anyone and everyone involved. I never, ever wanted to be involved in this battle, but if we have an issue of this magnitude, how are we to not engage in this and expect anything we care about, from the environment to the water we drink, the food we eat? How can we not engage in this? And as far as the current administration, or any other for that matter, they are in a roundabout way continuing to perpetuate the official denial of this is just, quote, jet exhaust and not a sprayed dispersion. And in regard to atmospheric conditions, they are changing very rapidly. In fact, the region where aircraft fly is warming very rapidly, making it even less conducive for a, quote, condensation trail. At geoengineeringwatch.org, we've had 2 former military pilots that fly private jet aircraft with very important people have contacted us. Their planes were forced into emergency auto descent because the air around that plane was about 45 degrees higher than it should have been. The air was not dense enough to carry that aircraft. So again, the bottom line is these programs are a covert global climate engineering Manhattan operation, solar radiation management, the stated purpose to put light scattering particles into the atmosphere to slow down some of the sun's incoming thermal energy without consideration of the consequences of doing so. And again, we have many in the climate science community getting closer to acknowledging these operations, but to do so is a very bad career decision, and we know that. And in regard to the toxicity, there's synergistic toxicity. When you combine these elements, they become exponentially more toxic. And we've had, in the case of fish, which is a concern in Wyoming, we've had California top biologists, we have his emails in our possession, contacted geoengineeringwatch.org because of the endangered Delta smelt fish in the Sacramento River Delta, and they were finding aluminum nanoparticles adhered to the gills of the smelt. And every time he tried to bring that to light, he had a boot put over his neck. Fish and Game in Northern California, top biologist, personal friend, bringing up the fact that there were the sediments behind the dams and the streams packed with bioavailable aluminum, boot over her neck. So again, and I'll go to questions now, but we're the largest research firm in the world in this issue. We've conducted hundreds and hundreds of tests all over the country. We've worked with academicians around the country, major institutions around the country, and this denial of this climate engineering elephant in the sky is mind-numbing. It will come out sooner than later. And again, our only purpose is to point out that this is absolutely the single most destructive, we would describe it as the single most destructive human activity so far, short of nuclear cataclysm. And again, the ramifications cannot be overstated from so many directions. So I welcome any questions. There's nothing you can ask me on this issue that I can't answer.
Thank you, Mr. Wigington. Are there any questions for Mr. Wigington? Yes, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Wigington, you said 60 million tons of chemical is being dispersed?
Based on our testing with University of Minnesota, about 500 lab tests in total. And we're talking about aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene. If you've ever seen foaming rain, there's surfactants in our rain, and that is part of the climate engineering mix to keep the particles from coagulating together, which increases their descent times. So all these elements in this testing with UC Minnesota, 500 tests in total. And again, the total figure of 40 to 60 million tons, not coincidentally, matches what the world's most recognized climate engineers state as their objective to disperse globally, 40 to 60 million tons of nanoparticles as part of solar radiation management operations.
My question, Mr. Chairman, is what company produces that? That's a lot of material.
It is, and we have peer-reviewed publication, peer-reviewed science study published implicating coal fly ash because of the chemical signature in coal fly ash as a base material for these operations. And that's where so much material can come from with other elements added. Again, that's peer-reviewed, published science study. American Elements Corporation appears to be one of the material suppliers for the added elements because we have very different constituents being found. For example, when we have a January 21st of this year snowstorm in New Orleans, Gulf Coast, and Florida, while it was above freezing and raining on the same day in Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, and Siberia, that flash snowstorm is not a natural event. These are patented processes. It's called chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. Anyone in this room that searches Chinese government create artificial snowstorm will find everybody covered it. Popular Science, CNN, MSNBC, The Guardian. But if you bring that up here, suddenly everybody denies it, especially in academia here. Why they're so invested in denying these operations is obvious. It's a bad career decision to do otherwise. But this is mainstream global coverage of operations that are happening here in the U.S., but we're not allowed to talk about it here in the U.S. So again, in regard to the bulk material, peer-reviewed, published science study that coal fly ash, because many of the constituents in that, although they're toxic, are conducive to climate engineering operations as long as you don't consider the consequences of doing so. So peer-reviewed science study, again, proving that that is a base material.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Wigington? Okay, seeing none. Okay, Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wigington, for getting on and testifying with us today. My question for you is, I have noticed over the years the droughts in Wyoming. I have noticed our sagebrush dying. People not being able to get normal growth on crops that they have, or even in fields that had good grass at one time. And now those fields are turning into foxtail, wiregrass, thistles. I mean, and we can spray all we want, but do you think that this change in soil and this change in growth and these plants that have always been very prevalent in Wyoming that are dying, and you can see them dying, do you think that this could be a result of what is being sprayed over our skies? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I don't think, I know. We know this from absolute science testing, countless precipitation testing. So when we have toxic rain, specifically with bioavailable aluminum particulates in that rain, aluminum doesn't exist in free form in the environment, by the way. It's always bonded to other elements. If you find free form aluminum, it's been mined, refined, and distributed. Again, that's a primary element named in climate engineering patents. So we have peer-reviewed science study to prove that this bioavailable aluminum affects root systems on everything, causes them to shut down nutrient uptake. They die a slow, protracted death. It's also altering soil pH values. We know this in Northern California from extensive testing working directly with the USDA, that so much toxic rain has fallen here in Northern California. We have normally acidic soils, and I have the USDA historical baselines in my possession from a contact at USDA. Our normally acidic soils of 5.4, 5.5 are now 6.5, 6.6. That's an escalation of 10 plus times toward alkaline, and that is a direct result of the toxic rain. In the West, we're losing all of our predominant forest tree, the Douglas fir tree. The die-off is so horrific here in the West. It's not just the beetles. Beetles are a symptom of a sick, dead, dying tree. We have altered soil pH value. We have altered hydrological cycle because climate engineering, and anybody who searches this, geoengineering will affect rain cycles. It is well acknowledged this will be the case. They're just not acknowledging that these programs have long since been operational. So when you combine the disruption of the hydrological cycle, toxic rain that's killing soil microbiome, affecting root systems, and geoengineering is also destroying the ozone layer. That is very, very critical. It's not getting better. We're metering this with a former NASA contract engineer with state-of-the-art equipment. We're getting UVC in the surface. That affects crops and flora as well. So but when you combine all these elements, you have, again, toxic soil, affected root systems, and because of these desiccant particles that not only disrupt the hydrological cycle, it affects atmospheric RH, relative humidity. So you have a condition called VPD, vapor pressure deficit, and that's not being acknowledged by the science community. That means when you alter that atmospheric chemistry, flora from crops to forests shut their stomata, their respiratory ports. That's how they breathe. That's how they absorb carbon. That's how they feed. That's how they release oxygen. And that is not happening. And so, again, climate engineering has thrown a massive wrench into the planet's natural cycles and the elements that allow flora to grow, allow crops to grow, trees to grow. This is a massive elephant in the equation. So the long answer to your question is there's zero doubt that climate engineering is the single biggest factor affecting all of these equations. And we have the whole of the so-called climate science community pretending it isn't happening. And I'll leave it with this. I had a NOAA scientist state to my face, we all know this is happening. We have no First Amendment protection. Again, there's a federal gag order on National Weather Service and NOAA. We don't know what to do. That was her statement to me, face to face.
Thank you. Representative Provenza, would you care to?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. So you mentioned China using weather modification. Are there concerns that other countries are looking to be using weather as a warfare method?
There is no question, and you can see U.S. Air Force generals, two of them in our documentary, The Dimming, acknowledging this. And it's a historical record that weather is being used as a weapon. And if we go back to hurricane modification, we have Jamaica being annihilated right now as we speak from a Cat 5 hurricane. The U.S. military first deployed its initial hurricane modification operations in 1947 with Project Cirrus. If we move forward in time, the weather modification from the U.S. military was so effective in the Vietnam War, and this is very different than the localized cloud seeding. I want to stress that. A localized cloud seeding aircraft, that might distribute 5 to 10 pounds of material in a flight. A KC-135 can dump 100 tons in a single flight. U.S. military is so effective at controlling precipitation in Vietnam in the 60s that by 1976, the international community passed INMOD treaties, environmental modification treaties, forbidding weather manipulation in wartime, but not over a country's own population. That's key. We have film footage of U.S. President Lyndon Johnson. For those that claim this is conspiracy, we don't have this kind of technology. 1962, 63 years ago, on film, on the record, then Vice President Lyndon Johnson stating we had the power to control the world's cloud layer then, and he who controls the weather controls the world. This is definitely a weapon of war. It's definitely been and is being used as a covert weapon of war. The documentation to back that up is mountainous, absolutely mountainous. And again, I would challenge everyone to, if listen to the U.S. Air Force generals, former U.S. government scientists that are speaking out in our film as well, acknowledging these operations. I'm only asking people to do some real research and not to buy the official denial that so many in academia seem so compelled to keep spitting out while these operations rage in our skies. And we have film footage, again, bottom line, film footage at geoengineeringwatch.org of these aircraft, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. This is going on.
Mr. Chairman, can I do a follow-up?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if other countries are using this as warfare, my question then is, if we pass legislation like this and we ban any investigation of how to create a defense, how are we going to have a defense mechanism if we can't do any research on it?
I'm not suggesting we don't research, and I'm not suggesting that other countries are conducting weather warfare over our country. That is, anything going on over our airspace is our country, our government, and we can speculate on all the agendas and objectives. I'm not going to fill in a blank that I can't know all of those agendas or objectives. But the fact that these operations are real and ongoing over our country, over our airspace, is inarguable. And the fact that there's global cooperation is inarguable. Again, we have posted with important sections highlighted 800-page U.S. Senate document outlining these programs going back as far as 1978. We have many other documents to corroborate this as well. And even the COP global climate conferences that claim to be an effort to curb business as usual to reduce CO2 emissions, behind closed doors at those conferences, it's simply an effort to actively or passively to force countries to participate in these operations, because you cannot just geoengineer over your own airspace without affecting the entire world. And so again, whatever speculation anyone wants to engage in as to the agendas and objectives, the fact that these programs are ongoing is inarguable, and we have the U.S. military stating on the record that they consider the ongoing climate collapse, this is from the U.S. military, to be the greatest national security threat of all. Are we to think that they wouldn't deploy these operations without asking us? Did anyone ask us if they could detonate 2,400 nuclear bombs? The fallout from Nevada alone, we now have a peer-reviewed study that proved the nuclear detonations in Nevada, which they told no one about, has killed eventually 700,000 Americans from that fallout. So again, I would argue that this is an immediate existential threat. I'm only asking people to do real research and not buy the official denial from so many in academia when we have a mountain of data to confirm these operations.
Thank you. Senator Ide has got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wigington, for being here. Your testimony is enlightening. I wanted just to emphasize the comments you made on messing with natural cycles, and that's where I have a real problem. Messing with Mother Nature. God's law on the weather is not something that we should probably be intervening in. My question is, there's been testimony on separating cloud seeding from geoengineering. Do you have opinion on that? Have any of you looked at the bill? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wiggins.
You are correct. We are on completely the same page. When you interfere with unimaginably complex natural systems, you can only get a bad result, period. And again, from localized, publicized cloud seeding operations to climate engineering, both bad. It is a matter of scale. So when we look at, again, single aircraft dispersions and the materials being used, localized cloud seeding operation with flares on the wings, perhaps distribution of 5 pounds of material, something in that range. Fully loaded KC-135 can carry 100 tons in a single payload. That's an inconceivable exponential difference, and the materials matter also. On our film, The Dimming, to put this into context, and the materials is starting with aluminum nanoparticles, which are toxic to all life forms, period, no exception. On film, on the record, at an international geoengineering conference, this is in our film, The Dimming, I confronted the world's most recognized climate engineer, Dr. David Keith, and after his 3-hour symposium of promoting the dispersion of tens of millions of tons of alumina nanoparticles into the atmosphere, I asked Dr. Keith, has any toxicological study been done whatsoever on carrying out these operations? His first answer was, well, we looked at atmospheric particulate loading. There's a lot up there. A little more won't hurt. Wait a minute. And this is 100 journalists in the room. I was one researcher. They allowed several questions, and they, after that, banned me from the subsequent conferences. But my question to him, my follow-up was, those materials in our atmosphere are not alumina. Have you studied alumina? His answer, no. Could terrible things happen tomorrow? We don't know. What kind of a cavalier attitude is that from the world's most recognized climate engineer? They do these programs because they can, because no one has so far been willing to stand up and tell the truth from academia, and the gag orders are a part of that. But bottom line is, though, again, if these operations are allowed to continue, we're not going to have much to care about for much longer. It's sterilizing soils, destroying the atmosphere's protective layers, starting with the ozone layer, and it is totally and completely disrupting and derailing the global hydrological cycle, and that is the primary cause of the droughts in the West. I'll leave it with this. Laws of physics make clear the atmosphere can carry 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. Based on unfiltered data, we are likely in the range of 3 degrees C right now. It should be raining much more overall, not less. If it's raining less, there's a factor we're not being told about. That is climate engineering and the desiccant particles they are distributing. It is much more effective at diminishing and dispersing rain than augmenting it. bottom line is it's all a disruption.
Thank you. Senator Crago's got a question. We're going to let him go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for Mr. Wigington. Is there a copy of the gag order on your website? Is that something we can look at?
Yes, there is. And yes, you can. And it's also featured in our documentary, The Dimming. And we are non-political. We don't sell anything else. And there is so much data presented in that documentary, including testimony from experts in every arena, Canadian Minister of Defense, former U.S. presidential cabinet members. There is so much data there. And yes, the gag order is also there. And that's a blanket gag order. This is what some in alt media have tried to discredit this by saying, no, there's no gag order specifically on geoengineering. Of course there's not. How big of a red flag would that be? It's a gag order on all agency operations on National Weather Service and NOAA.
Thank you.
Thank you.